like to introduce you to Vicky James Perkins. Vicky, can you give us a wave so everybody can see who you are? There we are. So Vicky is an independent clinical psychologist who specialises in supporting children and young people who've experienced early developmental trauma and attachment difficulties. She began her work with children and families as a primary school teacher, where she taught across schools in South Wales. This experience has always stayed with her as she moved through her training and early experiences as a clinical psychologist. These included working in a specialist child and adolescent mental health service and in South East Wales Adoption Service, where she was the clinical lead of the psychology team. So lots and lots of experience. Most recently, Vicky has moved to independent practice, where she works with the Tessa Project, delivering groups and running consultations to adoptive families, as well as contributing to the clinical work within the family place. I know at least one of you is aware of the Tessa Project, but that's something quite new and innovative over the last couple of years, giving support to adoptive families. We know that foster families used to have lots and lots of support, but now we've got Tessa, which is giving some support to adoptive families beyond that first year, when things can get a little bit tricky for them. So her work with the family place has enabled her to extend her experience and commitment to supporting adoptive families across the varying stages of their adoption journey. She's a special interest in working alongside school staff, appreciating how much connection and relational safety is established through their interactions with pupils, but she also knows how challenging that can be. She therefore feels excited for this opportunity to work with Adoption UK, to share some of her ideas of what she's learned from schools and to be helpful in their continued support of vulnerable children in difficult circumstances. Vicky's email address is at the end of the presentation, and I'll put it on the chat, and if anybody would like to invite her to do some inset training within schools, she would be very happy to do that too. So I think I better introduce myself as well, just in case some of you haven't met me before. I'm Julie Mosley, and I'm the Lead Education Officer for Adoption UK Wales. And I've been in this post since last November, when we were allocated money by the Welsh Government to provide 200 schools across Wales with the membership to Adoption UK. So this is the kind of thing that we want to be doing every now and again, to provide you with some training, and lots of resources becoming available on our website to help you with supporting the needs of vulnerable children. Because I do feel quite strongly, I've got a teacher background myself. I was a teacher for 33 years until I retired. I was a deputy head for 12 years during that time as well. So I've got a big understanding of schools, and I do feel quite strongly that what we can suggest for you is not just going to help children that are adopted or even vulnerable children at this time. A lot of what Vicky's talking about is going to help all children who are coming back to school dysregulated and not feeling quite themselves after lockdown. So I really hope you're going to find that very useful. So has anybody got any questions before Becky starts sharing her screen and introduces herself? Okay, Vicky, over to you. Thank you.
I'll just start to share my screen now. Julie, can you let me know when it comes up for everybody, please?
Yeah.
Okay, is that up fully?
It is. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I can just see my presentation and Julie's warm face. So Julie will keep an eye on the chat function as I'm starting. So I'm here today, as you've all signed up to support your continued thinking in creating a sense of safety for your pupils and for your staff teams after lockdown. So the format I'm taking today, I'm going to present kind of key themes and ideas and approaches that we have found helpful, and the schools are telling us have found helpful. The format I'm going to do is give a bit of an introduction about the ideas I'm drawing on. and talk about two key themes. So key theme one is thinking a bit together about re-establishing not just physical safety, but psychological safety, what that means and looks like in your school. And then we'll take about 20 minutes on that, and then we'll have a chance to come back together and have a think about your experiences of that, or any questions you want to ask. And similarly then for key theme 2, which is making sense of things together, before we think then drawing it together at the end. So hopefully I'll be sharing with you ideas that you'll find helpful, and I'll be prompting you as I go along to note down sort of key action points so that this feels relevant to you and useful to you. We can see how busy you are, particularly at this time. What I would ask of you right now before I proceed is, no need to share, just when I think of a child who perhaps is worries you, is a worry for you, or is challenging for you, causes you a lot of thought, a lot of frustration, whatever child pops up into mind, or few children, just hold those in mind, and at the end we'll kind of revisit that, and my hope would be that you have some ideas about how you might continue in supporting that child. So to start with, and so whilst I'm talking, do feel free to ask any questions or comments in the chat function. Julie will keep an eye on them, and then we'll draw them together when we come back. So our introduction, obviously you're here. This is in some ways a very exciting time, with the restrictions of COVID beginning to lift, but of course we're still in it. We have restrictions around. COVID is here. And I'm very mindful, you will perhaps have been familiar with this kind of metaphor of the same storm. Yes, we're all in COVID, different boats, and appreciating that your pupils will have had individual, very different experiences of what COVID has meant to them, for their families, for their personal circumstances. And you, as well as individuals, we will all have been affected by COVID in different ways, and also appreciating your school system, your context, your team will have experienced it in, there'll be opportunities and positive things that might have come from it, as well as challenges. So there's so much variation in where you're at this moment. And just thinking about now, those of you here, I think so far we've got about 15 people here, teachers, and you will also have very different experiences in some of these ideas I'm going to talk about today. So do please contribute, ask questions to make sure that's helpful for you. So in thinking about where we're at, I just wanted to really acknowledge that what's a very real phenomenon at this moment is this expression called COVID fatigue. So that refers to apparently not a physical fatigue, although I don't know anybody who's not exhausted at this time, but more a complex set of emotions such as sadness, resentment, frustration, worry, all resulting from the pandemic restrictions. So what that means, the reason why I'm outlining that at the very start, is when we're thinking with you about how can you continue to support your pupils who have gone through a really rough time, so have you. We're still in this trauma, you're still in this trauma, both as an individual, but as a professional as well. So today, I'm going to share with you lots of different ideas. Please take what fits, discard the rest. And I guess I just want to acknowledge that all of us sitting here right now, if we think of the metaphor as how resourced we are as our cup of water, you're being required to pour water in your pupils' cups to resource them. You can't pour from an empty cup. So right now, I guess just acknowledging some of us, our cup of water will be pretty low, and for others it might be more resourced. And that will change from hour to hour, day to day, week to week. So if you're here right now and your cup's reasonably empty, just clock the ideas that might fit, hold them when and if that water gets more resource. Julie made a joke that she'd like to think that there's alcohol in that little glass there, but that's another kind of self-care idea. So I just wanted to give a brief background. There's so much to say on this, about the ideas and approaches I'm drawing on today, and speaking to what Julie mentioned on, whilst I work with adoptive children and families, and this is a training from Adoption UK, This is in fact for all children, so it should be relevant for all children. So your work, your job is about helping children learn. So what neuroscience over the last 20 years has exploded, and what we know of that is we learn when we feel safe in our environments, in our relationship with other people. Children only develop through relationships. So we can only proceed to learn, progress to learning once those things are in place. What happens when children experience tricky starts, so when trauma interrupts, when life is really tricky for them in different ways, is they have an experience, they learn that the world isn't always safe. So physically, they might not be safe in their environment at different times, and relationships aren't always safe. So when children come into schools, already they're going to be more alert to that. That's going to be trickier for them to experience, or for them to accept that safety from you. So what we know is that whilst these approaches, attachment, trauma-informed kind of stuff, has been brought about in thinking about how you support children who've had a tricky time, so vulnerable children, children who are in care, children who have experienced being in care, which is adoptive children. And I guess just to acknowledge, where for children to come into adoption means that they will have experienced a number of traumas in different ways to different extents. But actually, this isn't about just trauma kind of research. This is about neurology, child development. This is how all children safely learn. And when you might come a bit stuck with some pupils who are struggling to access that more typical traditional kind of support and learning. And of course, we're in a time where we have all experienced a collective trauma to an extent, so all the more reason to draw on these trauma-informed approaches. And all of this literature and evidence has started to filter through to the policies and guidelines that you're working to in education. So the Estyn Healthy and Happy, the new curriculum Wales, prioritising health and well-being, acknowledging that we learn best through relationships, through good attachments. That's what is most indicative of then good outcomes with regards to learning. So I hope that kind of conveys that sense of this isn't just for that small percentage of kids who've had a hard time. This is for all children, and now so more than ever with the kind of circumstances we're under. So what I'm going to draw on a model for those of you who have some experience in some kind of this literature and approaches. I've pulled together the ideas from Bruce Perry, who explains that our brains develop in a neurosequential way. That is, they develop in this little picture here, that dark bit at the bottom, the brainstem. We perceive information through our body. It first goes to that kind of bottom part of our brain, which is our amygdala. Am I safe? Immediately. Only once, it's sort of like a fire alarm, only once that amygdala registers you're safe, that neurologically you can proceed then up through the middle part of the brain, the limbic systems, the connections with people, right to the front, the yellow bit, the prefrontal cortex, which is I'm ready to learn, I can take stuff in, I can attend. So we know that's how brains develop. When trauma interrupts, we are needing to focus more of our energy on the kind of the two bottom parts of the brain. So Kim Golding also sections this out. So first of all, you're going to be, Julie, can you see my mouse when I hover? No, don't worry. And the top text is about learning, exploring trauma, mourning and loss. This is your bread and butter. This is what you do all the time and what you're trained and skilled at. And I appreciate that right now there's a real focus in schools on supporting children to talk through, to process, to feel safe in their loss, which is the top of this pyramid. So neurologically, the prefrontal cortex. What I'm going to share with you today, because you'll already be doing that great stuff, what I'm going to share with you today is the stuff that is necessary in order to access that part of children's brains. And when pupils who are struggling to do that stuff need more safety. So the themes are organised around that kind of neurological sequencing. So the first theme I'm thinking about today is re-establishing basic as well as physical safety. So of course there is so much, their priority is, and there's so much work around how do we keep physically safe with this very dangerous virus and all of the rituals and procedures around that. What's really helpful to remember is, as well as that physically, am I safe in immediate threat? What communicates safety to us through the way we perceive our body and our brains are rituals and structures throughout the day. So I appreciate, we hear all the time, have a routine, have it clear, follow it. But this is about appreciating that it's those things that is what starts to initially create a sense of safety. So it's the big stuff like you will walk in through this gate, this area, this door, we will sit in this classroom on this seat, and here's your pens, and this is the toilets we access. And the little things like you'll hang your coat here this time, you'll put your lunch bag here. Those are the things, if we think about going into our office, it's that stuff that preoccupies your immediate kind of sense of orientation. So this is, I guess, to really impress on how important that stuff is that I know you're already doing, is really kind of key to keep holding on to. So challenges would be, of course, children who have experienced early losses and traumas, but also children who have experienced that through COVID. They'll be really triggered to this. This world is a really changeable place, so that will have been really rocked for them. So all of them, they're going to need it kind of like higher in a higher dosage. As well as the challenges that brings, we've heard a lot, haven't we, Julie, of teachers and parents feeding back to us that actually with these restrictions on routines and structures have come increased safety. So, for example, this picture here in the top, this very neat, kind of clear, kind of illustrates that stripping away of all the noise and bustle and unstructure. And so there is one way to get in, one way to walk, one area to sit. We're not going to assembly. One teacher will come to you. In fact, that can often bring an increase of sense of safety for young people. So really holding on to how you hold those structures and how important that is, both with a sense of identity and belonging for pupils. So that they've been away, it's been disruptive for so long, but coming back together in, this is what we do in our school. We wear red in our uniform, or we hang our coats here, or we sing our good morning song like this. So you will be doing all these things, but making it kind of really explicit. We do this together in our school. We put our things here. Really helps elicit that sense of, I know what's coming, I know the next bit, and it's continuous and it doesn't change. And I guess just noting the second picture is kind of in reference to break times, and actually as you will all be aware of, break times are really tricky. Unstructured times with peers are really tricky for kids who struggle with relationships. And so with these extra restrictions, for some children, it can provide kind of increased structure about that and safety. So that's why that can work for some children quite well. I just wanted to say as well, perhaps I can talk, I'm mindful, we can talk in the Q&A about, whilst you will already have communicated those routines and structures, what will be important is appreciating when we're under stress. And I don't know about all of you, but my cognition certainly gets fuzzy and I forget things quite a lot at the moment. We need that kind of information repeated, consolidated in different ways. So I'm talking about, more obvious stuff like visual kind of prompts, that's respectful to how old children are, because we process information better sometimes in those ways. And also, I'm also thinking about how you describe that through movement, through showing it out, through chance. Just lots of ways in which children will need us to keep noting what's happening in this day, particularly when they get wobbly, because they'll be in their survival brain, they won't be in their logical brain, it'll be compromised. And yeah, so we can think a little bit more about what else that might look like in our Q&A. So the first bit was thinking about how we increase safety through our rituals and routines, as well as the physical safety. This is about re-establishing safety in our bodies when we're in school. So help me feel safe in my body. We're feeling safe with the hand washing, the masks, or the gels, all that stuff is about physical safety. But what we know is that children who've experienced early trauma, struggle to integrate their sensory system in the ways that typically happens when we've had a safe enough start. And what that means then is that they struggle to feel safe in their bodies when they have big or little discomfort, worried feelings, frightened feelings. They haven't had enough experiences of being soothed, of that being made sense of. So they're going to be kind of triggered quicker by stuff going on around them. They're going to be very cleverly alert to that. But secondly, it'll feel bigger in their bodies, and it will be harder for them to get calm. So what they will do is very cleverly seek out ways to feel better in their bodies again. So this is referred to as proprioceptive feedback. I'll go on to describe some examples, but I guess first of all, appreciating through lockdown, all of our movement has been restricted. We're stuck watching a screen. We haven't had the opportunities our bodies might ordinarily have. Pupils who attend any sports groups, clubs, all of that stuff has been limited, reduced. And also I appreciate now in returning back to school, you're having to work in bubbles, which can be a benefit with regards to keeping the stimulus quieter, more safer. It also that restricts the opportunities that children need sometimes to get safe in their body, to walk around, to access whatever they might ordinarily by taking a note to another person's class, by being able to walk out to the play area for that time, to the forest school. So that's a challenge in how do you know when a children is trying to get safe in their body through this? So this is often the kids who are quite shovey, pushy, wandering around the classroom, disruptive, fiddly, won't sit still. All of these kinds of behaviours is a sign that they're needing extra kind of input in their bodies to feel safe, which is trickier through kind of the bubbles and the restrictions. So in thinking about appreciating children, depending on how tricky their experiences have been, whether in early trauma or through lockdown, we would expect that they would have an increased kind of need. They'd feel more wobbles inside, more stress, and they will therefore go to more of these behaviours. So the helpful thing is, as you're already doing, is notice what the child in your class goes to. Are they a wanderer? Are they being rough? Are they pushing? Are they rocking on their chair? Are they notice what they would naturally go to, and how frequently? That you can guarantee after 10 minutes he'll be off his seat. That gives a really good indication of how frequently they're needing those movement breaks. So I'm focusing here on proprioceptive movement stuff, just because that presents as the most challenging often, and it's a really key theme in kind of supporting children, particularly in the classroom. So what their need is to feel safe in their bodies, what they need that in small, frequent moments, a minute here and there, rather than 1 hour of karate once a week, or two lessons of PE. Even the Daily Mile is brilliant, but that's more about cardiovascular rather than having pressure in your body. So we're talking about the pulling and the pushing, that resistance stuff. So that's all great, keep doing all of that, but this is about small kind of discrete stuff. So this is challenging in a classroom when you're in a bubble, when your child can't move away, you can't send them off and separate. So here are some ideas that have been helpful. So stacking chairs, that kind of weight stuff, carrying heavy books from one part of the room to another, anything heavy in a rucksack. Obviously, you will know what might fit. You're having to be very creative. But wiping of the board, that kind of push, that idea of, can you wipe it really hard? Because I want that out really clear. That kind of, so you're getting really good pressure in, carrying, push, pull. What you're trying to do is offer safe opportunities for a pupil to get that kind of feedback into their body, as well as that kind of force stuff. There's all the other sensory systems, just holding in mind. And again, I'm talking about lots here, but just take what fits for you or what comes to mind when I asked you to think about that pupil at the beginning. So these are some of the things that we can look for. So vestibular, which is basically movement. When a child has experienced neglect, hasn't been rocked in those ways, they really need that kind of sense in them. So these are children who might rock on their chair a lot. And I don't know where, you know, your experiences, but the number of times I've shouted, stop rocking on your chair, listen. And what I've learned over this work is that is their way of trying to listen. I know a little boy once said, if I stop, he was a fiddler, if I stop fiddling, I will then have to use all my energy to stop fiddling. I won't be able to take in what you're saying. So just noticing what they might need with regards to movement. And I appreciate you're limited in what your resources are in the classroom, but here are some pictures to kind of have a think about that. So there's the movement, there's the oral. So for example, I don't know any of us who don't, under times of stress, go to the biscuit cupboard and clamp down. And of course, as adults, we're in control of that. Working from home, we're in control of that. Or on our tea break, you choose what you have. That can be really soothing to children. So I guess just noticing what might be helpful or what might they go to, particularly if a child sucks their clothes a lot, their uniform, or goes to bite. Noticing what snacks might help at different times, you can hold in mind, and I can say more about that if you want in the Q&A. And then of course the more obvious stuff like what are the noises around them, how might we reduce that, the visual stuff, the lights, the kind of the displays. Schools are wonderfully, you know, beautiful displayed visual places, but at times that can be part of what's overwhelming. So again, just notice what a child might go to, whether the little corners you have of the safe place when they can't access a particular room. All of these things increase. First, you're noticing, I can see you're struggling. I can see you're not feeling okay. I'll talk about the words we use later. And let's try this. And even doing it before they get wobbly, if you know for sure he's not going to manage on circle time, or when I do my starter, he's not going to see it through, how you might adapt things before that point. I'm going to stop share for the moment and check our time. Oh, good, Julie, we're good for time. So we have up to 10 minutes if you want to use this to think about. So a bit of a recap is thinking about why the structures and routines that you're all doing are important, how you might enhance them or consolidate them, and how important that is to kind of register in our brainstem and amygdala. I'm safe, I know this world, and also in here I'm all astir, I'm all a whirl. How can I find safety in a way that isn't just the challenging behaviour stuff? And how might you support a child with that? Did anything come through, Julie, on the chat?
Not at the moment there. No. I can remember one teacher who was quite difficult time at home. Sorry, can you hear her?
It's a little bit stilted, Julie.
Yeah. No. I don't know if there's anything about that. Let me try to put the mic off. Is that any better? No.
You can try, Julie. You can try and say something and see if you can catch it.
This little boy every morning, quite regulated by things that happened at home. And he used to love using, I had a rotary pencil sharpener, and he used to love using that. And on mornings where he was particularly good, he'd just come in, pick up a pot of pencils and sharpen pencils until he felt calm again. And that's what he needed. So that worked really well for him. So we might have some things like that we can share.
I think that transitions are really important. And Julie and I were just saying that can be a whole other hour, but how we help children come into the schools, to the anxiety of not knowing or not feeling safe enough in knowing the ritual of what happens next. You will have thought well about that and have that in place, but they will be really triggered at that point. So it's always really helpful to have that routine really clear on the initial kind of exact, we'll come here, we'll do this, and then we'll move on to that. And that including something to meet his kind of proprioception needs, to do something. And yeah.
And if you've got something you want to say but you don't feel that you want to actually physically say it, do put it in the chat, and I can relay it and we can talk about it. I don't know how people think about, Vicky said about this need to fiddle. I used to let children have fiddle toys on the table sometimes if it was a real need for them. And believe it or not, it didn't tend to mean that everybody wanted one. I think sometimes children know when there are children that specifically need something like this, and if it's annoying you that they're fiddling, it's probably annoying the children sitting near to them on the table as well. So allowing them to have a fiddle toy of some kind or just a stress ball can make a big difference to them, and it's also giving them the message that you understand their problems and that you want to help them, which is very powerful.
Please do as well share ideas that you found helpful. So with regards to action points, I hope that you have one idea that you can enhance how you communicate to your pupils this sense of safety through this is what we do here, and let me keep consolidating that in a really light way that feels safe. So please do share what you're finding helpful, as well as the little tips and tricks with regards to how do you get a child to feel safe when they can't leave the room and they can't access what they usually do, and you've got 29 other kids, 31 often other kids to be managing. Just checking some of the comments. Thank you for the comments, those of you put in. Yeah, a chew toy. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I find what's really helpful, particularly when we think of children who, for me anyway, who I find challenging, it's really hard sometimes to kind of put and appreciate what's going on inside and how that feels. But we all are human beings with bodies, with preferences. I'm a big biscuit chomper. I'm not big on milkshakes. I need to move frequently. I know a colleague of mine who was in an incubator for the first month. He needs a lot of physical kind of wrap, so he has a heavy blanket sometimes at his desk over his knee, his legs. I worked with a little one who he needs a lot of pressure, so he sits he's a bit of a chubby little thing, but he sits in a chair that's a bit too small for him because it gives him that kind of containment, but without being trapped. Because sometimes children can feel trapped, particularly if we kind of offer it as a strategy. Calm down, they can immediately feel suspicious, or if already they struggle with relationships, which I'll talk about in key theme 2, they're going to resist that. So it sort of needs to be offered lightly, in the same ways that you would do to each other in the staff room. Hey, you look like you've had a rough one, let me make you a cup of tea, or have one of my biscuits. We don't say you need a calm down strategy, I can see you're dysregulated. It's not normal, is it? Like, so notice the things you go to, the things you appreciate. I don't particularly like the rock stuff, makes me feel sick. I'm not keen on swings, but that works really well for another person. So we will all have preferences that we go to as adults to kind of get ourselves feeling calm in our body. And the kids will do the same, but they won't have trusted adults to help them with that. And they will likely, in schools, what we expect of children as they grow older increases how difficult the difficulties in them accessing that. Particularly, I don't know, those of you from primary school, the transition from infants to juniors, a lot more is required at that point, and developmentally our kids are much earlier on, never mind thinking about comprehensive secondary schools. Blowing bubbles, yeah, that's a good one, particularly if a child is, we know about how much oxygen that can breathe through. Yeah, that's a good one. The sucking juice with the tiny straws. That's really hard, isn't it? Can you still hear me, Julie? Am I coming through? Okay. Yeah. So tiny straws work well because you've got to work hard, particularly those cartons we have to tilt them up. A thick yogurt, a smoothie through a straw, the thicker the better because you have to suck hard on that. Anything crunchy that goes with whatever the dietary things are with the family in the school, whether that's a pack of mini cheddars or crisps or a carrot stick. I know which I'd prefer, but and anything tactile. I guess there's so much, and there's some really great ideas there about what might work. What's really important is go into your own kind of the child will show you which of them they're going to. It's not necessary for you to have this kind of complete understanding of sensory differences. What are they doing? How might I help them do that in a different way? So one of my kids, they hang on the doorknobs in the school. You still have to say, oi, stop doing that, you'll break the doorknob. But your body needs a good stretch. Let's find somewhere safe to stretch out. Let's have a look now. What can we use? And, you know, maybe you can't use anything. I'm really sorry. There's nothing safe here to stretch out on. What else could we do right now? So obviously you're still having to manage those behaviours. But what you add on to create safety is, I can see you need to do this right now. You're feeling buzzy. You need a bit of a break. Let's do this, which is what we're kind of thinking about. So
somebody's mentioned the brain break cards and the brain break procedures is particularly useful, isn't it? And to give the whole class a chance to just stop and do something. Brain break, yeah. There is a site called, has anybody heard of Go Noodle? I'll put it in the chat. Go Noodle is basically a website that's got lots of brain break type activities. There's yoga activities, there's stretching activities. They've got little dances that you can almost like go in and do a dice kind of thing, and it will select an activity for you, or you can work through it in a program kind of way. So that's really nice to give the whole class a kind of brain break when you can see them struggling, or even at regular intervals during the day.
It's a really nice approach, because it's not stigmatizing. It's not about the naughty one, the one that struggles, the vulnerable one, because there's always that sense going around. But this is about what we all need together as humans, and in our class, all our brains need a break sometimes. It's a lovely way to start to kind of give some understanding to what's going on, and even noticing sometimes with your disruptive ones, if they're not doing the yoga thing nicely, your body doesn't want to move right now. It's really busy. It needs a big move. We need bubbles. We'll do bubbles next, or you won't be able to meet what their bodies need all the time. But noticing that and naming that is a really important way to communicate. I see you, I get it, to help them not feel so alone with that. Okay. And I guess that it helps. It's just making me think that whilst we do the talking about feelings and what's going on and how to regulate, nothing encodes until we do it in the moment with our children. The reflection stuff builds on that. It's tempting sometimes to feel we can convince our children into or describe it, but it's in the moment doing it together is where the kind of the power comes from it. Okay. Is there anything else before I move on to theme 2?
There is a charitable organisation, I don't know if you've heard of it, called adoptive. It's led by an ex-teacher, two ex-head teachers, Gail Griffiths and Sue Pilcher, and they offer sensory training for teachers, and it's excellent. If you get a chance, look at their website. I put it in, and with the website address, but if you Google adoptive, you will get to it. And they're running another sensory training session in June, so that's I would really recommend that one. Spent quite a lot of time on there talking about the use of exercise balls, and that was in one of your pictures, wasn't it, Vicky? And that's there's some nice activities for exercise balls, and if you Google exercise ball activities, you'll come up with quite a lot there. It might be something that you could let a small group go and do with a teacher's assistant, including that child that you're particularly worried about.
And I can appreciate your teachers. You're not OTs, and this is about noticing what. And for those of you who are in the older ages, what we know is that schools do impose the traditions around it and work. This sitting, staying still, listening, quite Victorian kind of ideas. And for those, we facilitate the movement stuff easier, better in kind of the infants' earlier years. It's as kids grow older that we're requiring more of their bodies when they're just not able to do that yet. So I guess this is about finding creative ways to kind of acknowledge that. And as adults, I don't know about you, but in meetings sometimes I can see people rocking their chair as adults as a way to regulate and keep listening. Or another colleague doodles a lot on the notepad. We all do it in different ways, And I guess it's appreciating where it might be easier or harder for you given your role and context and and your classroom resources and all of those things. And so hopefully you can have an idea about how you communicate that kind of ritual together. This is what we do, being really explicit about it. And particularly because when we're stressed, we kind of lose that from our thinking brain. And even if you just have more of a sense of, that's why he's going to that. His body is a stir and a buzz and he just can't manage it. And the only way that makes it feel better is to move and do something. And that will be heightened if we're very stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we'll go on to
I have heard of a lot of secondary schools are starting to do now, because it is more difficult in that context, is to have a space available in the school. Sometimes it's a nurture room where when children can be seen to be really struggling, that they can go there and that there would be some fidget toys available for them, somewhere where they can just sit and calm down. Because if they're in the class in that state, they're going to struggle and they're going to distract the rest of the class. So, you know, it could be that just allowing them to go there, I mean, obviously supervised, might just help them to come back in and settle in again.
Okay, thanks, Julie. I'm going to pop the share screen back up. Julie, can you tell me when you can see it?
I will do, yes.
It's slow, isn't it? Has it come up?
Yes, it's there now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, so remembering the sequence of our brain, how we get to our learning. So the kids who are struggling, we're needing more attention to that kind of earlier part of their brain. Am I safe? So and these things kind of come together is once a child feels physically has an increased sense of safety with, I know what's coming, I know what the day is going to look like, I can kind of ease up on all of those little details that I'm a bit stressed about, and they've got some opportunity to get safe in their bodies, or even that someone acknowledge it can just clock that's hard right now in your body, is building that relationship. Are we safe? What are we going to be like again? And of course, all of those themes with COVID are relationships were severed or ended abruptly without warning, which is hard anyway. But for children who have experienced a number of trauma, kind of breaks in relationships or disruptions, that's particularly triggering for them. So, and all of us can appreciate when we get back again and see colleagues, it's all a bit awkward when you first start meeting with people again and saying hello and all of that kind of stuff. So this is about what do we feel like? Are we okay? And particularly for children, for young people, they need adults, they need those relationships to be able to proceed safely, to access the kind of learning stuff. So acknowledge. Often the most natural thing to say to a pupil when you see them was, how was your Easter? Nice to see you. How was your Easter? How was your time? What was lockdown like? Which are all completely normal questions. For children where you know they will have had a rough time, either because home was already tricky or they were already struggling from early trauma stuff, or they've had a bad time, that can be a really tricky question for them, because basically it was rubbish and they're either going to give you some platitudes or not necessarily answer. So what they're needing to get a sense of is, you never forgot them. They were still in your minds. So it might be something like, you might say, I'm really glad that we're all back here. Hey, I watched this advert on TV of this really great footballer kicking this ball, and I thought, that's just like Joe. It just made me think of you. So I was thinking of you then every time I see that advert. Or I had an Easter egg and it had a purple sparkly wrapping paper. And I thought, Lacey loves purple sparklies. I hope she's all right. I'm so glad we're back together again. So basically, when you're trying to connect, when we say, how are you? I don't know, I say it to my partner when he comes in, how was your day? Fine. We're trying to connect, but those questions aren't very helpful sometimes in connecting. So notice how you try and do that. What, we're back together and I didn't forget you. In whatever kind of way, style you talk, whatever kind of way you think with your pupil that might fit, can be one helpful idea to kind of re-establish that. And again, this is thinking about, this is what we do together. It's really tricky when you come back together with someone and you sort of out a sync together, and appreciating everyone's still in this trauma stage where COVID is still around and organising everything. So again, any of those things of what you say together, those rituals of, I don't know, a handshake or a sign, or hey, come and do this, I've missed you, wiping down the board or moving the chairs here, whatever it is, make that explicit, and be explicit about your appreciate your, I want to say joy, but I don't mean in that yay way. I mean in there just a genuine, we're together again, a smile, a smirk, whatever kind of dry wit you have with them, a gesture that connects you back in. And again, the reason why it needs to be explicit is because vulnerable children will be extra triggered. It's not that you've neglected them or caused that, but they will be triggered as if it was that severing, and as if you didn't care, as if you didn't want them, even though logically they won't necessarily think in that. So now the next one, this is sort of a big one in children will how they show us that they need us. So in schools, particularly for, typically the younger the child, the more that they will need support from the key adult in the classroom, whether that's a teacher, teaching assistant. As a child gets older, we expect them to be increasingly independent. So for example, the number of times I would say, if you need me, put your hand up or let me know. Which is fine if a child has had an experience of the world's all right, people can be trusted and relied on, and my needs can be met. And if I've got tricky feelings, they're mostly responded to. That works for a child who's had those kinds of early experiences. For children where they haven't been responded to, they've been ignored, shouted at, they haven't been able to cue safely, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling worried, they're going to find this really tricky. So the children in your class will, how do they communicate to you? I'm struggling, I need you, first of all, before I talk about how might they accept your attempts for support. So some children, we kind of can group them a little bit. In attachment literature, they describe it as avoidant or insecure, but some children will pull us close. So these are the kids that might be fussy. They might come to you and say, oh miss, I got this cut on my finger and it's a tiny little thing. Or they might come to you and bring you a paperclip that they found on the floor, or a bit of rubbish. Or they might fuss on, can I open the window? All of these, and they will do this quite frequently, which can be quite irritating, disruptive. So what we're thinking about is, what is that child's need at that time? And this is a child who is feeling anxious, is feeling wobbly, is feeling nervous about whatever that might be, about the work, about settling again, about the instruction, about just being back, being away from home, all of those things kind of a little storm together. They're fuzzy, they're feeling scared, and so they need support with that. So they will find it in whatever behaviours they can that work kind of well enough for them. What we're saying is not always give them attention. Of course you can't do that, and actually attachment wise that's not healthy either. What we're is clocking, that's an attachment need. There can be helpful sometimes to move beyond the how annoying is that behaviour, stop it, because the temptation is sit down, stop fussing. I speak from my own experience. And what that tends to do is the more we kind of push them back out, the quicker they fling back, and the more frequently they fling back to kind of fussing over things. It just doesn't stop. It causes us kind of more work. So what we're thinking about is, what teachers have fed back has been helpful is how you kind of clock that in your mind. This is a need, something is wobbly for them right now or today. And how you might communicate, I'm still here, even though I've just set you off to task. So small things might be, a couple of teachers have shared with us, even walking to the child and then announcing the transition. So, right, 5 more minutes, we're going to move over to this subject, has been enough sometimes to communicate, I'm here, you're safe. just that physical presence, which fits obviously with child development with little ones, because developmentally that child will be much younger. So physical proximity, that might also be come and sit close to me when I'm describing the instructions. That whilst that can be about listen carefully to instructions, there's a danger that that can be a little bit punitive, or a sense of come here, you need to listen, the subtlety of our tone. This is more about keeping them close. Hey, I want you close to me so I can be sure that this is making sense. And you wouldn't necessarily say it like that was quite a nurturing tone. For a younger child, you might just, whatever your style is, a sense of come close, you're important to me, I want it to feel safe. So you might also, any small ways you can do that check-in before. So things like just a little thumbs up across the room, a little wink, a little, I'm going to stop in 2 minutes, okay? All of those small gestures, whilst I appreciate they take more time and thought, what the feedback has been and what I've found clinically is that will save you so much in those constant niggly behaviours that are just draining. So kind of a little bit preemptively is enough to say it's all right. Can be really helpful when a child is pulling you close all the time with whatever behaviours, challenging, annoying, whatever they might be. That's about what's the need beneath, how might I be able to meet it? You can't meet it all the time, but those little bits do, what teachers are reporting, make a big difference. So this is one of those quick wins kind of stuff. The opposite, when a child is needing you close, but is pushing you away, even when you're saying, you okay, do you need help? And these are the kids who will be shouting out, being rude, niggling their mates on the table, wandering around when you set them to task, chucking stuff, bigger behaviours. So again, that's partly going to be, you're going to be holding in mind, does this kid need to move? He's all buzzing his body. He can't do 10 minutes. It's been too much for him. There's that kind of part you'll be thinking about and what's possible. But there's also is he struggling? And this is his way of kind of getting me close, is by these big kind of pushy behaviours. That's, I guess, what we're thinking about is when a child experiences a discomfort feeling, whether that's, nervousness about doing something, about failing, anxiety, when they've expressed that over and over and over, and that's been pushed away or shouted at or ignored, they will find that really hard to share with somebody. So they need you, but they're also pushing you away. So again, clocking that. So an example, a teacher fed back with an 11-year-old boy who got quite violent in the classroom. He would always, after the starter, say, can you come? He didn't need his books moved and the board rubbed. Can you move these books for me before we start? The proprioceptive stuff, the I see you, we're in, that proximity, that keeping close was enough to help him begin to settle sometimes. And I'll talk about expectations at the end. So again, it's clocking. What's this about? What do they need? Are they safe in their body? Are the expectations for this one too much right now? How might I communicate? I see you, I'm here, in a way to increase safety. You're not going to help them feel completely safe, but any of those little gestures, any ideas that you have, I'd be really keen to hear kind of what you're finding working about the clocking, checking in together. And then the repair. So this is about not the repair of behaviour. We're not talking about behaviour here. This is about we're still okay. We've been apart. For some of the trickier kids, their behaviours, I imagine, are going to be escalating, increased, and they're going to be getting into trouble. And that kind of fear of when things have been disrupted for them, relationships have ended, things have been broken, but that sense of I'm still here. So whichever gestures you can do to communicate that, whether at the extreme if a children's been excluded or sent out, when they come back in, just that putting their pens nicely for the motion in that, or a little kind of a smile, or even a word, or I'm glad you're back, let's try this again, I know this is tricky right now. So we can think about what you might say for repair if you'd like that in the Q&A, but it's really important to think about repair is about gestures, it's about non-verbal, it's a sense of we're still okay, we have got to sort out, you can't be kicking off like that when I say it's time for numeracy. but I'm still here, we're still okay. There'll be lots of lovely, creative, kind of idiosyncratic ways you'll already be doing that. But that's the stuff that heals. Attachment is 1/3 being attuned, getting each other, getting it right. 1/3 rupture, getting it wrong, shouting, then failing it, you having to put those consequences in. But the other third, that's the important bit for healing stuff, healing from trauma, is repair. Whatever happens, we're still okay. So I guess just really valuing how important that is, because repair can often feel like, oh, I got that wrong again, or they've got that wrong again. So repair is a really great kind of opportunity. So the next bit, let me just check my time. Okay, is making sense. So this is about how we begin to attune to our pupils' different emotions that they'll have. And you'll all be doing lots of great things about trying to create a context where we can talk about feelings or the impact of what this has been like for us, either in lockdown or back at school. So this is about how might you best get them in a place where they can take in all this great stuff that you're giving them. So what we know when we talk about hard things, it needs to be done dotted continuously. It's really great to have circle time about feelings or thrive, like all that stuff is brilliant. But the stuff that really creates change is small and often, small and frequent, because that's how it's done in real life when we're trying to process things, particularly when we're children. So for example, a number of times parents and teachers, parents will say, they asked that big thing when we were walking to Asda's, or when we were trying to choose hair slides, or often with teenagers, when I'm driving them somewhere, they'll start to ask a little bit and then they'll close back down. It's completely healthy and important. It can be helpful to think about it as like stepping in puddles. They'll step a bit and then they'll come back out. So that's the stuff. And you guys talked about kind of that brain break. I really like that idea of just creating that cultural kind of context of, we are always thinking about where we're at, how does that feel? And I guess making it feel, I'll talk about the second point first, is what can help that talking is limiting eye contact. So when eyes have been frightening, or when there hasn't been enough nurture through eyes, we literally, our eyes aren't online. It's like the Wi-Fi's out yet, because they're in their survival brain. So eye contact can be really tricky, particularly when you're stressed. So one of the kind of challenging thing is, traditionally we might say, look at me when I'm talking at you, particularly when they've gotten something wrong. That can be really unhelpful for them at that time. A really common thing to say, I've said it loads of times, but what we know is, I guess it takes the steam out of how cross we are feeling, because they neurologically can't yet, they're not wired up yet because they're in a stress mode. So anything that limits eye contact. So the rows you're having to sit in now are actually helpful in that way, rather than having to face each other. So pupils facing each other, having to read faces is really stressful sometimes. We talk best through movements. Through walking, through the rumble of the car. And I'm obviously not suggesting you go on car journeys, but just what isn't easy is sat across from each other like this. So therapeutically, we've adjusted what we do. Sat in a circle. Whilst that can be great for kids who are safe enough to talk about feelings and wobbles and are confident that would be okay, for kids that hasn't been enough of their experience, that's really stressful. So just keep thinking about what might make talking easier. Neurologically in their body, and small and frequent, name out loud, hey, my body's feeling kind of stuck, let's do a bit of a brain break, and naming that out loud in a way that's really kind of normalized. We need to be curious for them. Often kids won't have words, or they might have a word superficially. They might be able to say, I'm sad, or I was bored, or I don't know, anxious, worried. They might be able to say those things. It's unlikely that they can really connect them in with how it actually feels. Developmental trauma means they've missed those kind of markers. So what I would be suggesting is still use all those kind of words, but say what it feels like inside. So there's a temptation to get kind of clever and articulate with how we name feelings. What really hits the mark is physiological sensations. So I'm feeling buzzy, you're feeling not okay inside, you're feeling all wobbly, it's just feeling all not right. all that stuff is the stuff that actually connects with actually how it feels. So that can really help build their, you know, the new curriculum Wales Health and Wellbeing. That's what builds their repertoire and knowledge of feelings and words, rather than a cognitive reflection afterwards. They might be able to do that, but it's not hitting into their body. So small and frequent. And one thing about expectations, you already know this, but you'll be working hard to try and do this different stuff. What we can't do is expect that just by saying that a child will turn around and go, thanks so much, you got that, you hit that nail right on the head there, I'm really appreciative of that. They will not. They will, like, what we'd expect is they'll ignore you, or they'll look at you funny, or they'll just walk away. We'd expect that. You can't literally rewire their brain of what they've learned yet at that point. I'll talk about expectations more at the end, but try not to be too discouraged by that. If you are, I'll talk about if you are feeling discouraged, go to a different strategy at that point. But yeah, don't think that's a failure. Absolutely not. You're just helping them learn a different way. So that can really put people off continuing with this kind of approach. You might tweak it, but yeah, we wouldn't expect for a child to be particularly appreciative at that point, or to open up or write on their learning objective, their feelings. That I appreciate you have to evidence as well, which again, I'll say a bit about. So let me come off this. Let's see. So, do you recognize some of those behaviors that are communicating, I need you, but I struggle with this one, so I'm going to give some behaviors out? And do you recognize, I guess I'm aware that you'll already be doing lots to talk about the tricky, the hard things, but where there might be barriers for that with pupils, or where they're just kind of closed to it. How is that feeling for you all, or examples that you found are helpful that you can share together? How long have we got? Let's see. Should we give 5 minutes to this bit? Do you recognise some of those push-pull behaviours? What do they look like in your classrooms? I'm mindful we've got a mix of primary and secondary teachers here.
I think the power when you have people like that, change your approach slightly, that can be so powerful. And it suddenly the child thinks, hey, there's someone here that cares. So just kind of think about, why are they like this, and how can I help them? It's really, really powerful.
I've been really surprised at how those very small I wouldn't have believed it unless it was fed back to me, very small stuff, getting in there a bit earlier really then takes things on a different trajectory for that child. And we appreciate that you don't need extra, you need stuff to make your life easier. So this is what teachers are finding now, more of the quick wins. Meet the need first, but in the small ways you can, when you can. Remember that cup of water. There'll be days where you'll just say, stop fussing, sit back down. Absolutely fine. These are about those moments when you can, when you're a bit resourced to try something that fits with your style as well, a little bit easier.
I know one of the families I'm working with, the head teacher decided to be a point of somewhere where the child could go and chat when they were feeling. And the first time the child actually went there, he went home to the parents after school, and he said, "Oh, I went and had a chat with whatever the head teacher's name was today, and you know what? She's actually really nice, and I know one thing: she cares about me." And that was a turning point for that child. You know, and things have really improved since the head teacher got involved in that way. So sometimes taking the child out and letting somebody else help them can be quite powerful as well. Well, there's a couple of things in chat there. I have one child who I just sit with silently when needed. We don't talk, we just stare in space together. That's lovely.
Yeah. It's lovely, and I really really value that non-verbal stuff. There's a temptation sometimes to say the right thing and to fix it, but that communicates so much safety, being physically alongside them. And I love the way you describe kind of just be together and notice your breath being together. And that's the stuff that that's the level at where they're needing to get safe in their brain. And remember, it can take young people hours sometimes, actually, neurologically, to be able to get calm in their amygdala, depending on how big their trauma has been. So don't don't underestimate how much you're doing in those moments and how well you're gauging that with young people.
Yeah.
Number of hands up as well, haven't we, Julie?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know your first name. Is it Gail? No, G. Shenton. Would you like?
Yeah, hi, it is Gail.
Hello, Gail. Yeah.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
I just wanted to say, really, what you said. I'm a head teacher, as it happens, and I think there's still a lot to be done for parents, isn't there, to raise the general awareness of parents, because we've had to spend an awful lot of time convincing the parents of those children who would say are not vulnerable then, that the head teacher having a cup of tea with one child is not favouritism. We've had to spend an awful lot of time educating them with regards to equity, and actually showing them the poster that parents find it acceptable that you help the children to read and they go to different groups for reading, but they have a general lack of understanding unless you educate them differently, that the emotional need needs to be met as well in an equitable way. And that, I think that's one of my frustrations, is the amount of time I have to spend teaching other people to be kind and to appreciate the needs of children. And I think there's a lot of educating to be done there for other people to understand that. I don't give up, I keep going, but it can be frustrating, can't it, when you're trying to show kindness and yet people think that is favoritism, and how protective people become.
It's a whole school culture thing as well, isn't it, really? Because I've known other staff get quite annoyed because these children are spending time with the head teacher, and other children as well. So it's a whole school kind of culture that we all have different needs, and sometimes people just need a little bit more TLC than others.
And it takes time, doesn't it? You have to build that into your school ethos.
Yeah. And of course, this is probably a bit contentious, I don't know, but I think one of the things that children that are suffering from attachment and trauma, one of the last things they need is to be sent out of the classroom. So I really like that comment about that one child we just sit with silently with when needed. It's time in rather than time out, isn't it? Because if you send them out of the classroom, you're taking away that one thing that they're actually deep down craving, which is attachment. So that, it's something we really need to think about, is those members of staff that might send children out when it's possibly not the right thing for them.
And I guess we'd be thinking about what you're doing there is you're helping them regulate, and neurologically they can't do the talking about what just happened in the classroom yet until they're regulated, and our trauma impacts on the development of brains. And I appreciate that the kind of energy, where you put your energy, is a really good point. When all your energy is taken trying to justify your approaches with different children's needs, what's possible then in what we're doing. I'm mindful with the lady, sorry, the names have gone away, with a lovely backdrop, had her hand up as well. Did you still want to say something?
That was neat, wasn't it? Yeah. Two things really. I really like the fact that the message is loud and clear that it's okay to not be okay, and that's at every level, isn't it? It's with ourselves, it's with staff, and it's with children. And I guess it's not always about having to fix things, but being there, thinking, being a bit more curious about our approaches and the way we do things, which brings me to my second point. And I think some strategies sound as though they're a bit not possible, like having a key worker or needing to do this, needing to do that. But to me, it's always a bit like spend to save. The more you do now or early on, and more conscious you are about things, later on, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks down the line, I don't need to do that anymore.
Thank you, Nikki. And it's a good point. And whilst we're acknowledging that always there's a resource issue and always there's kind of work and fight to be done with securing what might be needed, what this is about is what are the small doable things. This isn't about making you mental health experts or adding to your workload. This is about the small things that you will already kind of instinctively have that get kind of stripped a little bit through these systems and the pressures you're under. That can make the big differences. And I've got a few last slides. We've got another hand up, but I can kind of bring that together a little bit. But it's a really important point, Nikki, about what's doable here and what makes our life easier. And there's still a reality of that kid needs something, that we still need to be working towards that. But there's lots of possible kind of small stuff as well. That, yeah. So, Kate Thomas. Miss Kate, Kay, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's me. Thank you. I just wanted to say that, yeah, we're the ones that began doing the brain break cards, but I found it really beneficial what you said about the challenges as well, because we were discussing the class this morning actually, which this has been really beneficial to me now, because we've got a few children within the class that are showing behaviours that you described, you know, fidgety, you know, getting attention of others, maybe moving around the classroom, and just how we're able to regulate that. And we've introduced the brain break cards, which are helping with the class teacher. However, they tend to not work as much with if another member of staff is in the class, they're taking advantage of it. So what the support member of staff done yesterday was take them out on the Daily Mile, but I think it was really good what you said, that actually they need maybe other things, so them small challenges I think will be really beneficial. So I'll definitely take that away. I think you know, that's really good.
Thanks, Kate. And also, as always, some of these things won't work all the time.
No.
Sometimes we need, I can't bear to do a breathing exercise if my body needs to move. It's going to be mismatched. So you can't do the right card to meet all the children's needs at each break. And that's okay. It's kind of clocking, your body's buzzy. I don't think it's ready for this calming one right now. Or let me just check now, what's the most of us? I can see busy bodies, I can see what do we need right now? Just generally, just even giving that a language recognises that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to just go through my last few slides. I appreciate you will be going at 11:30, and I want to just share a few last things, and then we'll have a bit of a chance to check back in together as well. So the system's a little bit slow coming up. Where are we?
That's Teams, unfortunately.
Julie, would you mind letting me know again when it comes up?
Of course, yeah.
Are we here?
Nearly there.
Is it okay?
No, it's blank at the moment.
Oh. I wonder if it's a bit slow.
It's strange, isn't it? Not me.
Is it coming? No, let me stop share. Perhaps I'll talk through the last few slides.
Oh, sorry, other people can see it.
Oh, you can. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I can now. It's obviously my Wi-Fi's gone a bit slow again. Sorry.
I'll just click the right thing, but I'll start talking, not to have that awkward Teams gap. Right, let's try again. It's getting slower, isn't it? Slower. Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay. So this is about thinking about managing expectations. Oh, good. So I appreciate you're here because you're really keen to keep, thinking of ideas to support your children, to tweak that. What I wanted to say is we often think about this is a helpful image of trauma. So we've got the bollards of trauma on one side. You know what? My grains of sand are in the wrong place. That's annoying. But you've got the bollards of trauma, and then you've got the protective factor, which often, particularly for adoptive families, is that adoptive family. And what we're wanting is to tip the scales. And there's a bit of a kind of a hope that, if they had just one intervention or one thing, we could tip the scales, one strategy, one approach in school on their IDP would work. What we know is development happens neurologically, developmentally, through grains of sand. Or the way that we heal, the way that we feel safe, that our exchanges together is a grain of sand. So when you're able to clock each other when a child walks in and do a thumbs up or a wink, or just gesture a chair closer and a gesture of help, that's a grain of sand. That child might not turn around and smile back or say, thanks for that, I appreciate it. nonetheless, that grain of sand has happened. So all of those moments we've kind of thought about together is, I can see your body's buzzing. We have to sit still for just 5 more minutes. Hang on in there. Is a grain of sand. What we know is so Louise Bomber, who researches the attachments in schools, what she has said is that for the balance to tip, so for us to see a notable change, it takes 18 months. So neurologically speaking, that's what we'd be expecting. So schools are fed back that they find this actually hopeful in that, of course, you work within blocks of 9 months, academic years. You're not necessarily going to see those changes, but it's really important to not be disheartened if that balance doesn't tip. Of course, you want it to, particularly if that child is causing a lot of your time and energy. But that's the stuff, is the grains. You'll be doing that already. It's just noticing, partly even if you come away from here recognizing that's why that really fits. I'm doing so much. It's really helpful, because to expect those kind of bollards or stones is the stuff that leads to burnout in the end, part of it. And I guess just thinking about what we just talked about was, we've talked about how do we help children feel safe, and I've talked more about the early stuff and safe in relationships before you actually even talk about feelings explicitly, and just really acknowledging, like, schools are still school. My impression is that there's even more put on you now and expected of you when we're still in a crisis. So professionally you're up against it, and personally you're still up against it to different extents. And this whole movement of catch up, and that was just hinted at before as well, this emphasis on they need to learn, they need to catch up. Yes, absolutely, we all agree with that. What we're kind of arguing or contesting is how you best get a child to catch up and learn is when they feel safe. If they're not catching up, they're not safe enough, they're needing more consolidation. So this is about, yes, but how we get there might look differently than what we might kind of traditionally have thought. And yeah, learning we know neurologically, learning can only happen when the safety things are in place. So going back to kind of the beginning, to our little glass of water here, I've shared lots of different ideas, and those of you who have more of a foundation in some of this language and attachment and trauma informed might recognize some of the ideas, but really just really acknowledging where you're at, and start with, take something small, disregard what you don't like, what doesn't fit for you, take the things that you think might work, or that you've got the energy for, that you've got some water, and we all have strengths in different areas of this. Get the quick win stuff. You are still in this crisis mode professionally, but also personally, so you can't expect everything to be reinvented. And the key thing is, when your cup is empty, you cannot pour. The focus isn't then on, pushing and pushing to try and do something with a child. You just feel even more resentful. I would feel that, and more under pressure about, oh, and I have to do this attachment thing now with them. Oh, it just feels too much. So at that point is when the focus needs to shift on, keep doing what you're doing anyway. How do you fill your own cup? So that's about having compassion that right now I am empty. Right now I just need to be furious at kids in my class, and it's just not shifting. And the parents, I've got parents here arguing about it, noticing what I'm doing. I've got this parent's not engaging. So what you need is the things I've just said. You need in your in professional spaces, your routines, where you are at each time. You need safe colleagues that you can rant and rave and not have empathy about that child and swear if you're a swearer. You need safe spaces where you can feel that it's safe to talk about all the different kinds of feelings that being in this job under this pressure at this time with these pupils feels like. And you need your own opportunities to get safe in your body. I can certainly remember the feeling of the anxiety in my body when here we go, the chair's going to be chucked, or we've got an hour of PE and I know this is going to go. So notice what you need. And I love that idea of modeling. So if you see the children are starting to get a bit buzzy, say, we are getting buzzy. Look at, and then name out loud, my body's kind of feeling like this. Let's get a break on. Let's do this. So that you're just embodying this whole approach of check our bodies in a way, and them watching you is much safer than you trying to kind of notice and label. It can feel intense if someone's doing that to us. So all of those things you need from your colleagues, from each other, in your rituals together as a staff team, and personally from your relationships, how safe that feels, and have loads and loads of compassion for yourselves with however full that cup is right now. If it's empty, right now it's empty. You're doing the best you can with what you have where you are. This isn't the time to start trying to have empathy for Johnny who just kicked so-and-so in the face and threw the chair when you've been working really hard to connect with him. Save that for another time when you've got more water in. Carry on as you are. I'm going to come off this and yeah, just check in with the ways in which you all support each other, because when we're needing the support the most is when we're all out. We need someone else to pour into our cup, and that's where we look to our colleagues, our head teachers, all our support kind of staff around us. And I appreciate the presentation has been on creating safety for pupils and staff, and I've talked largely about pupils. I'm really acknowledging that you can't do this until you have a bit of resource and until you can be regulated or get regulated some of the times and feel safe in your relationships, and that's absolutely okay. Well, I acknowledging the pressures you're under for that not to be okay. That thing of a regulated teacher, dysregulated teacher can't teach a dysregulated child. That I find that can be a little bit unhelpful sometimes, because it just puts more shame on having to be better. But yeah, so we're coming out of time. Did anyone want to, I mean, Julie can stay on for another 5 minutes, but is there anything for those of you who have to shoot off, a big thank you. Did you want to ask something or comment? Sorry, I haven't left enough time for you to share the ways in which you support each other in filling up your own cup with the teas, the biscuits, the chats, the rants, the ideas. Anything come to mind?
That is a really important point about using one another, and sometimes if you don't feel able to meet that child's needs, there might be another member of staff that child has had a good relationship with, and you might be able to send them to that child with a little note, that they could look after them for a little while and just enable you both to calm down a little bit. I think that needs to be a whole cool school kind of approach. It's something that we used to do in the school where I used to teach. Which is quite useful, and quite often the children would be sent to me.
One teacher did say, I can't be with him for most of the day, so luckily she had a TA, but she said tag me, I'm up here. And that's as safe as that's safe as well. That's as much safety as you can get in those moments, rather than just pushing through. And yeah, Julie, I'm mindful of time. Sorry.
Earlier about taking their check-in sessions with children outside. That's quite a good thing, isn't it? Where the child can feel safe, nobody else is going to listen in. And we used to have an exercise area on our yard with some gym equipment, very simple gym equipment. So by going out there with the children that were struggling, they had a chance to do some of that proprioceptor stuff. And we could all see it from the window, but none of the children batted an eyelid if they saw people out there, because they knew it was what they needed. So yeah.
I'm mindful about the comment about showing equality and things and equity, the difference, but just that sense of their body is buzzy and needs to move. Your body looks calm enough to learn. We're ready. Yeah. He needs a bit more help to get calm in his body. He'll be ready soon. We're all different. We all need calm at different times. Can be a helpful way to really be explicit about that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Julie, I'm mindful of time and everyone's commitments. Shall I say my thank you and hand over to you, Julie, for our end?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, Nikki Sneeslin is one of our LAC leads. Nikki, did you have anything that you wanted to say at the end? It's been really nice that you could join us.
Just to thank Vicky, really. I think that's been really useful, not only for young people who are adopted and looked after, but it applies to everyone, doesn't it? All of us, all our staff and all pupils currently. So thank you very much, Vicky.
Yeah. I think if I'd been participating in this when I was a teacher, I would have found this really, really useful. And certainly there are some messages I'll be taking back to the schools that we're working with, and particularly pertinent at this time I think, and some of you have related how some of the pupils that you wouldn't expect to be struggling are actually struggling at the moment. And I think, you know, thinking about it in the context of their early trauma, you know, does kind of explain that a little bit more. Yeah, so Vicky, thank you so much. I found this really, really useful, and I think everybody else has.
Thank you for all the contributions. It's been really helpful to try and make sure it's meaningful to you all, given the breadth of where you're at. So thank you.
Lots of
will the video be available? Will the recording be available?
Yes, well, we're hoping to put this on our website. It has to go through our comms team first, but this was one of the resources that we were hoping to put on the website. So yes, as long as Vicky's happy with the recording when it comes out and everything, and I will make it available in the chat when it comes through, so that you can all have a look and see if you feel that you're happy for it to be on the website. You know, I think some of the things that Vicky's spoken about, we could actually do sessions, whole sessions on that, you know, like sensory issues and the emotional literacy aspect of it. I think, you know, there's a place there for whole sessions, so perhaps that's something we'll think about in the future. So brilliant, thank you. So any other comments from anybody? So I want to thank you all very much for giving up your time this morning, for joining us. You know, you'll be getting another newsletter in the next couple of weeks. We're going to do another welcome meeting for those of you that missed the first ones. And we're planning some more events to come up and a lot more things going on our website.